We are creatures of desire. What we most desire is meaning. What makes us suffer most is a lack of meaning.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Marital therapist, author, and communications trainer Andrew G. Marshall invites guests from all walks of life to discuss what makes life meaningful.
Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall. Welcome to The Meaningful Life. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, and wherever you find your podcasts. Is there someone who loomed large in your life at a formative time, in particular young adulthood between 15 and 30? It might be an ex-partner, an old boss, or a tricky friend who you can't dislodge from your heart and mind. Why do we cling to these, let's use the term, monsters who've enthralled or appalled us and in some ways still limit our lives today? I'm happy to welcome back psychotherapist Charlotte Fox Weber to the podcast. She trained at the Tavistock and Portman Trust, the Institute of Psychoanalysis and the Regent University. She's the author of the book What We Want, A Journey Through 12 of Our Deepest Desires. And if you look back in my series, you'll find that we've spoken before on that topic. But today, we're going to discuss the themes of her next book, which comes out in February of 2026. And the book is called Sacred Monsters. So, Charlotte, welcome back. What interested you in sacred monsters, and what exactly is a sacred monster?
Firstly, it's great to be back here. I enjoyed our conversation before, and sacred monsters is a term that I've borrowed from Cocteau. It's usually used to describe a certain kind of celebrity artist, someone who behaves appallingly and transgressively but gets away with it. And I find that we have our personal sacred monsters as well. They're not all on the public stage. They're monstrous in some ways and utterly enchanting and significant and even beloved in other ways. And I almost needed to write this book because of my own intense preoccupation with these figures in my life. And I didn't have a name for them. I didn't know how to describe them. I went to therapy for many, many years. I became a therapist. I would try to make sense of them. And ultimately, there's a kind of contradictory element to how we feel about certain people in our life.
So maybe the best way of understanding what a sacred monster is, if you could share one of your sacred monsters with us.
Certainly. I will start with the most difficult one.
Always a good place to start.
Always. Take the path of most resistance. I got involved with a much older man when I was a young woman, and he was a well-known artist, and he was dangerous and charming and intoxicating and very infatuated with me, and it was ego-enhancing and then utterly diminishing and quite dangerous. And it was an entanglement that went on for about a year in real time, but lingered for decades in how it affected me.
So give us an example of him being wonderful and him being a monster, so we get a sense of the range.
He could be incredibly funny and mischievous and observant, and I had never been near anything like it, just energetically. He zoomed in on things, he noticed details, he was exuberant, and then he could say something utterly diminishing in the next breath and turn away.
And so how would he actually diminish you? Because there's a difference between him diminishing, another celebrity, and, then that's funny, isn't it? But then when the spotlight turns on you, it's completely and utterly soul-destroying.
I'll give you a more specific example. He was obsessed with my youth and obsessed with it wasn't exactly innocence. I was in my early 20s, but he would say how fresh and beautiful he found me. And then he would often quote a Shakespeare sonnet, "Lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds."
Ooh. Wow.
So right there, that line I found utterly haunting.
And I could feel that would have the power to actually make us terrified of actually growing older.
Terrified. And also, I mean, if you are lucky enough to be appealing in your youth, then it's all the more tragic to get old.
Well, actually, personally, I just get more gorgeous every year, but I didn't have a sacred monster actually telling me that my youth was something that was so incredibly treasurable. And of course it is, but he's sort of turning into almost like a fetish.
Oh, a complete fetish. And there was also something about the very thing he was desiring that he was also destroying in his sense of my innocence.
He wanted your innocence, but also there's a part of him that was destroying it at the same time.
Yeah.
They really get under our skin, these sacred monsters, don't they?
They do. So what happened after was that I technically moved on. I made sensible enough choices. On paper, I was not utterly self-destructive, but internally, this unresolved issue, wound, and treasure, this combination, this nameless thing was just with me for years and years in every relationship. And it would pop up in surprising ways in the workplace, in friendships, in romantic situations where it was almost as if I was trying to recreate the dynamic, even though I was so desperate to get away from it.
And he somehow got into your brain and your own internal thought pattern. Am I right about that?
You probably are. I struggled with whether I was often doing an either or in my mind. Is it this or is it that? Has he changed me or has he had no impact whatsoever? Was I like this before or was I someone completely different? I think he changed who I am in some ways, partly because I chose for him to.
And perhaps when we've gone through a few different sacred monsters, we'll talk about how to actually deal with these sacred monsters. But the one in the book that I've been thinking about a lot, because I've been fortunate enough to get a preview, is a monster that's sort of almost inside us rather than somebody outside. And this is the perverse imp inside us who's egging us on to do things we know is going to blow up our life. So tell us about the perverse imp.
So Edgar Allan Poe wrote a story called The Imp of the Perverse, and it's about someone. Have you read the story?
I have, yes. It's both a horrifying story and a wonderful story.
It is. It's marvelous reading, but it's about someone who has that urge to just destroy and almost gets away with something and then kind of can't bear it and brings on annihilation in a way. It's a very inadequate, reductive summary of the story, but the theme of the imp of the perverse fascinates me. It's this wish for destruction that lives inside us, and it lands in all sorts of nefarious ways. It could mean too much drinking, taking drugs, having sex with someone inappropriate. It could mean just self-sabotaging or saying something really caustic and insensitive. It plays out subtly, but I think it's a part of human nature that we struggle to get comfortable with because we like to think of ourselves as self-seeking creatures who do things that are in our best interest.
And you say the imp is a messenger, not the master.
Yes, I think that when we can be comfortable with our inner imp, we don't have to blow our lives up. So as a psychotherapist, and I'm imagining that you see this quite a lot in your work, there can be a kind of restless drive towards chaos, towards destruction, danger.
I'm recognizing some clients.
So, I mean, someone who's kind of bored, aimless, frustrated, resentful, overburdened. There is a possible flirtation emerging. Would it be a good idea with 2 young children at home and an irritating husband to go and spend the night with this other person and just have a completely irresponsible, reckless misadventure? Sounds tempting and probably not a good idea. But I think those temptations can be really, really overwhelming if we don't know how to hold space for them and how to even think about them.
So how do you listen to the message of the perverse imp without actually taking it literally and going off to that hotel room and having that fling with that irresponsible man?
So the woman in this scenario might come to therapy and describe the ennui, the angst, the frustration, the titillating details, and looking at what's underneath, what the purpose might be, what it's for, thinking about the bigger picture, thinking about how it might actually play out, what an affair might actually mean or lead to, and honoring the right to have the fantasy, indulging the reverie to a degree, holding space for the romantic longing and not denying it, but thinking in a somewhat realistic way about what's fantasy and what's actually possible. And very often there is a kind of escape plan that lands on an affair as the total solution that will just solve or at least offer an exit jumping point for getting out of difficulties. And I think the imp can be the kind of the dictator in those moments.
But instead, we should say, because I can hear this potential client that probably both of us have met saying, I want something for me, and this would be just for me.
Right. And that's often part of an affair. The secrecy, the greed, the pleasure, the feeling of being seen, the connection, the aliveness. All of those things are understandable and human and not shameful. And the particular incidental character is not going to be the solution, the man who you have the affair with, in all likelihood. But thinking about how you can get more from your life and not just kind of dampen those desires, but if you're really bored, if you're plotless, if you feel like your life has become meaningless, that's something to take seriously and to really pay attention to. And that's where I think the imp can be useful, and it doesn't have to be taken literally. It can be more figurative.
And this is why I like your idea that the imp is a messenger, not the master. Normally, we take him as the master. He must be right. And in some way, he is right that if you are doing everything for everybody else, your husband and your children and your mother, and there's nothing for you, well, that's an important message to take. But probably the affair is not going to be for you. It's going to blow your life up. But there could be some other things that would be for you that would enhance your life, and maybe enhance the life of everybody else as well.
Yes, and is actually feasible and doesn't require another person in the same way as an affair.
So the next of your monsters that rather interested me was the trickster. And you were talking about the trickster knows the borderlands between truth and lies, between promise and betrayal, presence and absence, and is a shape shifter. So tell me about tricksters.
Tricksters are archetypal figures, and I mean, it's symbolic, it's kind of mythological. We can think of examples in stories, in folk tales, in almost every culture, and in our own lives and in ourselves, of that character who is mischievous and somehow kind of plays and doesn't follow the ordinary conventional rules and gets away with it and is neither here nor there and might be nomadic, might be restless, might not really commit. A trickster type can be a kind of a prankster, and that can apply in different areas of life. It could be an artist, it could be a banker. The profession could be anything, but kind of a little bit of a joker who also has an element of truth that makes it engaging and tantalizing.
So give us an example of how a trickster might be a sacred monster.
A trickster might be a sacred monster by being a daredevil who somehow comes out ahead. So it could be a frenemy. This happens a lot. I mean, some of it might be projection as well, but I'm going to give a cultural example of this. I don't know if people still love Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I do. My children do. Do you?
I've never seen this movie, I'm afraid to say, but I know it's a very well-known movie, so let's stay with this example.
Ferris Bueller takes a day off and goes wild and is utterly charming and charismatic and gets away with it and pulls out all the stops. And his sister gets angrier and angrier as the day goes on because she's the hardworking one and she's doing everything she's supposed to be doing, having no fun whatsoever, and seeing her brother get away with madness and frivolity. And he, not only does he get away with it, but as the audience, we are cheering for him. And tricksters pull you in so that even when you know that they're very bold and really misbehaving, it's kind of stop more, because it's a little bit thrilling and exciting. And we actually love to see the overturn of uptight authority.
And it legitimizes our false self, you say. So what is our false self, first of all, and how does it legitimize it?
It might legitimize our false self if we're wanting to pretend that we are a certain way, that we can get away with something and be irreverent and nonchalant and live according to our own standards. So an example of this is an older man who calls himself a womanizer, even though that's a term that is no longer so acceptable. He's well-spoken and went to Oxford or Cambridge and plays parts that allow him in society to kind of sit at any table. So he can speak in an eloquent, erudite way, but he also is mischievous and can speak with lowlives and use politically incorrect terms. And he's somehow, even though he should be a scoundrel, he is somehow endearing. And he might be the trickster for some of the women he strings along and for some of his friends who try to live responsible lives and go home to their wives and are glad to have children or justify why they are glad to hold down meaningful, steady jobs. And the trickster somehow doesn't pick up the bill and lives a colorful life and is freer than the rest.
So there's another sacred monster, and this is an example sometimes of how we can be monstered by other people, and that's the scapegoat. So explain the scapegoat, and then I'm going to bring in a letter that's been written in because it sort of rather fits into this theme. So tell me how the scapegoat works, first of all.
So the scapegoat is the designated carrier of all the problems, all the sins and mistakes. And in almost every group, whether it's family, school, social situation, there is a tendency to designate one person as the baddie, as the kind of outcast. And it's a way of organizing society. There are certain reasons it happens. It's incredibly painful and excruciating and problematic, but I think it's also important to see why there's a scapegoating tendency among human beings. In families, it happens in fascinating and upsetting ways where one person is the problem holder and everyone else organizes themselves around it.
So I'm going to give a small example of this from my own personal life, because it wasn't done to a monstrous amount, but it was actually done. I came from a family that believed that you shouldn't talk about emotions and feelings because it would make things worse. Now, as you can imagine, I couldn't go along with that, as I'm sitting here talking to you, and I sit in my office all day long talking to people about emotions and feelings. So how the scapegoating would work is I would say the bad things or the impossible things, or I would get upset, and I would then be scapegoated for being too sensitive. And so the problem was not that the rule of the household was impossible to fulfill and have a meaningful life, but actually I was too sensitive. I was bringing up feelings and I was talking about things which were probably best left unsaid.
I love that example. I relate entirely. So much so. I think a lot of psychotherapists are recovering scapegoats.
And the problem, because we all do it, because, I will scapegoat people too. It's something that is deep inside us, and it feels sort of rather righteous when we do it. We say, oh, this person is the problem, if only they were a bit more sensitive, or they thought before they opened their mouths, etc., etc. So it does feel good when we scapegoat ourselves. I think we have to recognize that.
Yes. And that is such an important point. That's another major social motivation for why scapegoating happens. Because, you might be connecting with a school mother and you're sort of friends. And then there's someone who's really appalling or does something outrageous, and being shocked and bothered and horrified is connecting with someone else. And all of a sudden kind of pointing at the scapegoat, forming the scapegoat is exhilarating. And you can feel really good about yourself in contrast.
Yeah, because I'm not like that mother who's over fussing about their children. I've got the perfect balance.
Right. Look at us compared to them, or compared to her.
Or that terribly neglectful woman who always forgets to turn up and the child is left there waiting. Did you see they were there yesterday? I'm feeling better about my own inadequacies already.
Absolutely. But it's amazing how we don't recognize the pattern of scapegoating. So at my older child's school, I was slightly disturbed when there was a child who was very scapegoated, and the family as well. And scapegoating can apply to types as well. It can be a category, but this child was the baddie in everyone's eyes. And then he moved away, and problem solved, according to a lot of the other parents. And there was this moment of, hooray, now everything is perfect, which really freaked me out, because I just thought, there's going to be a job vacancy, and who is going to fill it? And when is it going to be my turn? When is it going to be my child's turn? Can't we look at this now? And I tried. And I think that risked making me a scapegoat by bringing up an issue that was not particularly agreeable for everyone, because people didn't want to hear about it.
So in a moment, we're going to look at our letter for this week, and we're going to see what this is going to teach us about scapegoating. And that's coming up in just a moment.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material and other benefits.
My men's retreat runs from Sunday the 28th of September to Wednesday the 1st of October in the woods just outside Berlin, Germany. Step out of your daily stress. Take stock of where your life is going and deepen your relationship with yourself and other men. One of the reasons everyone feels more anxious is not just the fast-changing world, but how we've become more isolated. In particular, we are cut off from the wisdom and support of other men, mostly because we find it difficult to open up and be truly vulnerable with each other. In my 4-day workshop, With a group of like-minded men, we can focus on what it means to be a man today and how we can support our sons to become balanced men. It will be a truly transformative experience, and I would like to share it with you. You can find out more about the beautiful location, the seminar house itself, and the costs on my website, andrewgmarshall.com. Click on the button Men's Retreat. Do it now because we've almost filled half the places.
Podbean, your message amplified.
Ready to share your message with the world? Start your podcast journey with Podbean.
Podbean, the AI-powered all-in-one podcast platform.
Thousands of businesses and enterprises trust Podbean to launch their podcasts.
Use Podbean to record your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to optimize your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to turn your blog into a podcast.
Use Podbean to distribute your podcast everywhere.
Launch your podcast on Podbean today.
If you want to participate in the program, send me a letter. You go to my website, andrewgmarshall.com. You go to the section of podcasts and you'll see there's something called Participate in the Program. I don't know how to deal with my elder siblings. I'm 5 years younger than the nearest, and the eldest is 15 years older than me. When I was growing up, I put it down to the age gap. Who wants an annoying little sister tagging on behind you? But it is harder and harder to process now we're all older. Our father is long since dead, which makes things worse, because he protected me from their cruelty. They can be spiteful and go out of their way to say hurtful things. It really upsets our mother, who's getting old and just wants us to get on. I try to play nice, but that just gives them the opportunity to stick the knife in and mock me. They have held family gatherings and not told me, but told Mum that I was too busy to come, which was a lie. My sister borrowed money when she was going through a difficult divorce, but when we asked for her to repay it, she said it was a gift, and we had plenty of money and we didn't need it. I'm at my wit's end. So what are you thinking, Charlotte?
Oh, I found it so moving. Are you sure you didn't write it for me?
Really?
Well, no, not the money part. It was utterly moving and very painful and could apply to many clients I have. I feel for the pain of being ganged up on and overpowered in that sense of who you are. I mean, it's a kind of miscasting that the siblings see this person in a certain way. And it's the tyranny of majority that the rest of the family sees this person in one way and you're all alone saying, I'm not who you think I am. And it's this constant misunderstanding, kind of deliberate misunderstanding. Hearing the letter, the first thing that came to mind was envy, envy, envy.
That's another sacred monster, isn't it?
It turns a lot into hate. And I feel like the rest of the family has maybe tried to push away their envy of this person by deciding that this person is problematic and looking for flaws.
So envy has a message for us. What is the message from envy?
Well, it can give different messages. There's the dark message. There's the impish message. Envy can give the message that you better get rid of whatever that thing is that you're envying, or surpass it, or overcome it, or one-up it. Sometimes you can't do that in the same currency. So I think in families, if there's envy over one person having more money, for example, the one-upping might be moral. It might be a sense of, well, I'm a good person and he isn't. And maybe it's true. I mean, I'm not suggesting innocence for anyone, but if you're envious of someone having a baby when you would desperately like a baby, you might find yourself turning away because it's simply too painful to witness what it is that you want that you can't have or don't yet have.
So how do you deal with that feeling?
Well, envy makes us intensely uncomfortable. It makes us so discontented. We are freaked out by it as an emotion. I mean, even psychotherapists can be really, really bad at dealing with their own envy. I don't know if you would agree with me about that.
I would like to hope that I'm not, but the fact that I've never really thought about my relationship with envy is making me really rather worried. So
yeah, I mean, if you can't remember, it's interesting when people say, I don't get envious. I don't feel envious. And it's often said as a kind of great relief. And I'm suspicious of anyone who denies experiencing occasional envy.
Yeah, well, I have experienced it, and then what I will do with it is I will say, there's something there that I would actually like myself. How can I, instead of actually being envious of that person, how can I take what it is that they have, that jealousy as well? How can I use it? And actually, I probably need some of that in my life myself. So I have experienced it.
And that's an interesting interpretation of envy that there's been some research on recently about the kind of benefits of leaning into envy, figuring out what it is that you want and getting more for yourself rather than shying away from it. It's not always possible to get what you want when you experience envy. Yeah, because
using your example of a baby, if I am too old to have a baby, then all the envy in the world is telling me that actually I really wish that I'd had a child. What do I do with that envy then when, if it's that they've got a beautiful car and maybe I need to get a new car, or I don't know, it's something that's achievable, that's different, isn't it?
Yes. And you might not be able to get what's achievable either. I mean, there's a lot that's unsettling about wanting versus having and feeling we must do something.
Yeah, but if you're envious of somebody having a house on the Côte d'Azur, I'm never going to be able to afford a house on the Côte d'Azur, but I could actually have a holiday in the Côte d'Azur. It might even be in a caravan park, but I could have the holiday in the Côte d'Azur. You don't have to have the literal thing the other person wants.
Is that an example?
I think so. I think that's an example of actually, if we're creative with that envy, we can find something.
Yes.
And even with the child, it's actually saying, I want to be involved with children. How can I become involved with children? You could become a teacher, for example, or I don't know, but there is something you could do if that's something you really want. You've got to listen to it.
Yes. And be curious about it. And it might turn out that the envy you have for the holiday on the Côte d'Azur is also really for a kind of lounging around time where you can go swimming and read and you picture yourself a certain way. It doesn't have to necessarily be a specific copy of whatever it is you think you envy. It could be some longing for the fantasy you have of how other people exist.
So let's go back to the letter. What advice would you give to this person about how to deal with their siblings?
So in this letter, I think the part we forget with envy is how imaginative it is. So it grows arms and legs and comes up with stories that are spectacular and vivid and even present as certain. If there's disavowed envy of this person, there is going to be a big family investment in seeing him or her incorrectly. The wish for clarity, the wish to be seen accurately is probably futile. And that's the kind of hard truth that I would give this person, because the attempts to correct, clarify, convey, to show actually, no, this is who I am. I'm not who you think I am. Why did you leave me out of this event? There's going to be deliberate inaccuracy and distortion and envy that's unchecked. I mean, if they think that it was a loan, that it was a gift, that the money owed isn't actually owed, they're choosing to stick to a kind of illusion. And reality isn't always possible to agree upon, which is really, really painful in family.
There's a phrase that I've heard several times before, which sort of feels relevant in this case, but is one of these really hard truths. I wonder what you think about it. What you think about me is nothing to do with me.
I've heard that, and I think I have a biased opinion of that particular line.
So why might it be helpful and why might it be unhelpful, this thought?
Well, can I say my bias first?
Yes, of course.
It was said by a teacher I had when I was growing up who was so brutally humiliating and unfair to certain students and then said that. And I remember thinking, I was about 12. I remember thinking, what we think of you does have something to do with you. Listen to us or get a sense of, don't be totally immune to feedback, but that was particular to that person. I like the line. I like the concept. There is constant projection and constant misunderstanding, deliberate misunderstanding, or unaware automatic misunderstanding. We are reaching for each other and missing each other and speaking different languages and having different conversations all the time, where you think it's going one way or you mean to convey one thing, and what you transmit and what is heard and what holds and what sticks. It's a lot messier and further away from the truth than we might imagine. And I think accepting that is actually a relief. So you might be disliked by someone and it might not have anything to do with you, unlike this teacher of mine.
So I think what I want to say on this particular one is that actually trying to fight everybody else's projections, how they want to see you, is pretty pointless, because they're just going to get angry with you and you're going to get angry with them. But I think you have the potential to actually say, well, this is how I see things. This is what I meant. So you can speak your truth, but I don't think there's much point fighting for your truth. What do you think of this?
I agree with you completely. And it's very hard to give up that fight because it's also a fight for love and connection and closeness. And in a way, it has to be mourned. So I had a client who is quite brilliant and accomplished in all sorts of ways. And her family refused to see it and recognize it. And there was this complete preference for the sibling who was a lot less remarkable. And my client could have won the Nobel Prize and it wouldn't have impressed her family. They refused to be impressed by her. And it was torturous. And she had a very strong wish to impress them and show off in that kind of beautiful childlike way of just, look at me, look at what I've done. And then she would get understandably very angry when whatever she had done and accomplished, she was still seen as the one who messed up because of how she kept the skin on the potatoes. The potato skin saga was really quite legendary in her family, and she could never recover from it. And they got her on that. Letting go of her need to be seen in a certain way was really, really tough. And also the constant fight was torturing her because she wasn't going to get through to them. It wasn't going to happen.
So what do we do with the sacred monsters in our lives?
So, with this example in mind, the letter, I think there is something wonderfully powerful and noble about saying something that is true, even if it's just for yourself, even if it isn't heard, not saying everything, but just saying something. So there's that line in The Great Gatsby when Nick Carraway says to Jay Gatsby, "You're worth the whole damn bunch of them." I don't know if you remember that line of the book, if it spoke to you. He doesn't say everything, but he just affirms something. And I think sometimes we need to do that for ourselves and for each other. But saying something to the family about what's actually been hurtful and what you know to be true. And it doesn't have to be a really long script, but maybe it will get through to them, maybe it won't. But then you have said it and you know you have said it, and you can accept the limits of your power.
And skip all the examples and the yous and the justification, because they will all just be heard as criticism. Whereas I felt upset when I wasn't invited to the party. That's your truth. Whereas you excluded me from the party, we're now beginning to get into a conflict. So I think you when you do speak your truths, you don't need to justify your truth. You don't need to say how horrible it is to be shut out. You just say, I felt excluded. You don't need to explain your feelings. And the other thing that I would say, which I think is the conclusion of your book, is that these sacred monsters do not take away our power, we give it to them. Tell me more about that.
I think that we are ambivalent about monsters in general, and things that scare us and intimidate us also excite us. If you think back to your childhood, to older children, to slightly scary figures, even monsters in films, you kind of hate them and they're terrifying, but they're also a little bit thrilling. And it's believing in something bigger than yourself. And I think in a way we want to give power to other people because it gives us an organizing belief system. It gives us a kind of shape to our experiences, something to work towards, something to define ourselves by. It just turns out that in adulthood, it tends not to be a lasting solution of overinvesting in the mythic status of certain people.
Well, that's basically all we've got time for. Before we finish, I want to ask you for an example, because I've already asked you what makes your life meaningful. I'd be interested to hear an example of something you've done recently that's been meaningful for you.
Something I've done recently? Or something I've experienced?
Either will be acceptable.
Writing about my sacred monster was meaningful and incredibly hard. And it was letting go of the ideal as well, because giving someone huge power also allows for incredible potential in life. And there's something limiting when you size down these figures in our lives, when you realize that actually your mother is just an ordinary mortal. The bully was a child. The monster was human. It can be oddly disappointing, but meaningful.
Well, actually, it's interesting you mentioned mothers, because we're going to talk about maternal monsters in the bonus material. And if you'd like to hear that, you can subscribe directly via Apple or Spotify. And if you want to become a supporter of The Meaningful Life and get the details that way, here are the details.
You've been listening to The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. You can follow Andrew on Twitter, like him on Facebook, and please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Making, editing, and distributing The Meaningful Life comes with substantial costs, and we'd like to ask for your help. Visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material for every program, send in a letter to be discussed by Andrew and his guests, and join a community of other people seeking to make their life meaningful. At the gold level, you get even more benefits. Production of The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall is by Michael Dooney. Social media by Madeleine Healy. Sound engineering and theme tune by Sebastian de la Luz Mendoza. And I'm Susie Colick. Please tell your friends and spread the word. Thank you.